Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad you could join us today. Today is Wednesday, the third day of our Sustainable Living Week live lessons. Today we have another wonderful guest speaker for you. But first, as usual, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about lessons that we have done earlier this week. Now, don't worry if you weren't able to join us earlier, because you can just take a guess at these questions and you can always watch the lessons previous on the recordings on our website. So, first question today. How much do you know about sustainable living? Let's see how much we all know. Oh, what percentage of global greenhouse gas emissions are generated by the fashion industry? Now, if you think it's 2%, put two hands up. If you think it's 5%, put one hand up. And if you think it's 10%, put your hand on your head. Let's see. Have a good guess. What you think? Being a lot of hands on heads and one hand up. Do we think? Very mixed. Okay. And Strathervapen have put their hand up in the meeting. Very good. Okay, let's find out if we're right. The correct answer is, hand on your head, a huge 10% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in the whole world globally are generated by the fashion industry. That's quite a lot if you think of all the other sources of greenhouse gases that we have, like transport and food growing. 10% is more than all global flights and shipping combined. So think of everyone flying everywhere for their holidays and all the packages and goods that are shipped around the world. 10% is more than all of that. That's quite a lot. And I think there's probably something we can do about that. Next question is, what percentage of global water pollution is caused by the fashion industry? If you think it's somewhere between 7 to 10%, put two hands up. If you think it's larger than that, 17 to 20%, put one hand up. And if you think it's more than a quarter, put a hand on your head, somewhere between 27 and 30%. Percentages can be hard to visualize in your head, but if you think of bites out of a pie slices, sometimes that's helpful. So how much water pollution do you think is caused by the fashion industry? Lots of question marks in the chat. Just have a guess. It's all right if you're not confident, if you don't know, that's okay. That's what we're here to learn today. So just try and have a guess and see what you think. Right. Seeing lots of hands on heads. Let's see if we're correct. The answer, surprisingly, is somewhere between 17 and 20%. So one hand up. That's still, it's not quite 30%, but it's still quite a lot. And I also think we can do something a bit better than that. If you were able to join us yesterday, what is one thing that you remember the most from yesterday? What did you learn about yesterday? For me, I particularly remember that you can make leather from pineapple leaves. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, remember, we still need to think about what to do with that product after it's finished its life as clothing or a handbag, right? If it gets holes in it or rips, we still need to think about what to do with it because it's not biodegradable. But I thought that was pretty cool. If you want to share in the chat something that you remember from yesterday, let's see what stuck with you. While you're thinking about that, I am absolutely delighted to welcome our guest speaker for today. Her name is Chloe Assam, and she joins us from the OR Foundation. We're traveling to another country today. So let's see If you can find out where she's coming to us from.
No? Okay. Hi. Thank you, Catriona.
No worries.
All right. Hello. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to talk to you about our work. As Catriona said, I'm Chloe. I'm Chloe Assam, and I work with a special community of people who work with secondhand clothing. It's a
Sorry,
pleasure to
Chloe,
meet you all.
all we're seeing is your presentation in edit mode. I think
Okay.
maybe yeah, there we go. Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, of course. So like I said, I'm Chloe and I work with folks who sell, recirculate, resize, and piece secondhand clothing together to make other products or for resale. So I have a diagram for you and I want you to participate. I want you to tell me where on the map do you think you can find me right now. So Catriona, where on the map, I guess to you all, can you find me and the people that we work with on the ground? If it's A, say A. If it's B, type B. If it's C, type C. Melvin says A. Leona says B. B. Okay, I think we have enough submissions. The answer is C. I'm speaking to you from Ghana, which is in West Africa. And this is a country of approximately 32 million people. So what do we think happens to your clothes? A lot of the time people ask us, how does the clothing arrive and where does it go? When most people donate their clothes, for example, at Oxfam or Goodwill, it will end up in markets, secondhand clothing markets like Kantamanto, which are the folks that I work with, and places in Uganda and places in other parts of Africa. And if you donate your clothes, it will likely end up in the stream like that. So when you ask where do my clothings go, usually when clothing is collected by donations or by textile recycling bins or in-store take-back schemes, which is fairly new, at least in the last 5 years. A lot of the culprits, fast fashion brands have been trying to take back clothing so that they will recycle. And there's also door-to-door recycling as well, and also resale platforms as Vinted. So in all of these 5 touch points, clothing flows through and will likely end up in places like Kantamanto, again, the folks that I work with. So Kantamanto is, next slide, please, Catriona. Yes, Kantamanto is a secondhand clothing market, and it recirculates 25 million clothing items each month, which is more than resale platforms like Vinted, more than most resale platforms. And we believe that Kantamanto has the mindset and the skill set to be able to keep clothing in circulation. And we envision that this language can be repeated elsewhere in the world so that we are not overwhelmed by the amount of clothing that is being produced every day. The reason why there's so much waste is Kantamanto, basically in Ghana, Accra, we receive 15 million clothing items each week. And as I said before, there are 32 million people in Ghana. That is more than enough clothes to go around each month. But the volumes that are coming are so overwhelming that Kantamanto is unable to do its job. And that's why in the 50 million garments that come each week, 40% will likely end up as waste. And waste because, as I'm sure you have all experienced or know now, the quality of clothing has declined so much in the last decade. What you find in the clothing stream is fast fashion and clothing that is not well done because it's using exploitative labor to be able to produce. So the secondhand clothing for us is not a charity. It is not simply recycling. It is not simply like circular. It is a supply chain and a business because people buy bales, people all open bales, people sort out the bales and try to find a home or a new use for the clothing that arrives. So there is an economic factor. There's money exchanging hands. And so we don't think it is a charity. Now, again, Kantamanto has a skill set and a mindset, and I have images that I'm looking forward to sharing with you and how clothing is recirculated. But then again, there is just so much waste because of the amount of volumes. Approximately, the last time I checked, the fashion industry produces 100 to 150 million clothing items each year. I said billion or million, I have to fact check that. But it's the volumes are a lot. And it also, I would like you to also imagine the gap between 100 and 150. It's a huge gap, and we're wondering where that estimate is coming from. So because there's just so much volumes, Kantamanto, places like Kantamanto are unable to do their job effectively. But we still retain the stance that Kantamanto has a skill set and a mindset to keep clothing in circulation. Again, they circulate 25 million garments every month. Next. So waste is defined as clothing that entities cannot profit from. So if you know anything about the clothing chain, the secondhand clothing chain, as a business, you know that the flow of clothing at each vantage point, at each collection point, at each exchange, people are selecting the things that they know are cream, being the best quality items, and giving away or passing off the things that they know will not be able to sell based off the quality of the clothing, based off the trends, based off of how much it will cost to retain, reuse, or repair the garment. And so we define waste as clothing that entities cannot profit from, because as it passes along the supply chain, each person, each stakeholder, each buyer, seller, or reseller is picking clothing that he knows or she knows that her clients will be able to purchase. And Kantamanto does the same when it arrives. And so waste is defined as clothing that entities cannot profit from. Next slide, please. Now, I've spoken to you about the volumes. I've spoken to you about how it arrives. It comes from the global north. And as I said before, it passes through several hands. And by the time it ends up in places like Kantamanto, a lot of the cream have been taken out. And you're usually finding low selections or low quality items in the bale of clothing. Now, there's a social impact, and then there's an environmental impact of clothing waste. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the environmental impact and see it on your screens and see it in news. I'm sure you've spoken about it during this Sustainable Living Week classes. I'm sure you see it every day and on the news as well. But oftentimes, it's almost as if the social and environmental impact are tackled differently and are measured differently. And there are reasons why, because with environmental impact, you're able to see tangibly how it is affecting the environment. On the social end, it becomes a bit complex and every situation is different. And so it requires different kind of approach and a different kind of metric to understand how clothing is interfering with certain social paradigms or setups. Next item. So on a social front, Kayaye literally means she who carries the burden. And these are young women and girls who primarily migrate from the northern part of Ghana to the southern part of Ghana, Accra, the city where I am speaking to you from. And when they arrive, because first of all, they are driven or pushed because of social issues, but mostly because of climate displacement and climate change. The kind of jobs and the kinds of practices that they usually do to be able to make ends meet have become harder and harder to do. They can't farm anymore because of the weather changes. There is drought and there's flooding. And those kinds of situations do not support like crop growth and a good harvest. And so they are unable to rely on the primary source of income and have to migrate to be able to make ends meet. So there are other social implications, and there are drivers that drive them to the southern part of Ghana. One being early marriages, one being poverty, of course, one being escaping the hardship of the north, and another being that they just want to, just like everyone else in the world, they want to find their own path, and they want to, go to a place where they can make a living and be able to sustain a living for themselves, and also be able to send money back home to take care of their families. Next slide. So this is Kayaye. These are the women that I was referring to. And as you can see, she's carrying a bale on her head. And if you see at the side of this of the picture, you see bales labeled A+ and having like wires wrapped around them. This is how the clothing arrives. And for me, it speaks to the opacity of the clothing chain or fashion industry, where almost everything is not transparent. There are no key shared it's hard for you to know what's going on in the industry because no one is sharing, and the people who hold the power are not willing to share the truth. And it speaks to how the clothing supply chain works. And for someone to pack up clothing baled in a translucent plastic, it tells me that the person is trying to hide something. It tells me they're trying to cover up the waste that they are sending. Because unlike in retail, when you can go in and actually see what you're buying, Kantamanto retailers do not know what they're buying, except that it is from the UK, it is from the US, or parts of Europe, or other parts of the global north. It doesn't tell them exactly the content of the bale. It doesn't tell them what they will be, what they should expect. It doesn't tell them the amount of clothing items. All of that is opaque, and it speaks to how things have worked and what we call like waste colonialism. Basically, a country or a part of the world having more power over another and being able to set up, prices and how things are done. So these women, going back to it, these women are Kayaye, and they're carrying 50 kg bales, and 55 actually. And I don't know if anyone knows how much 55 kg bales would weigh, but I would use myself an example in the sense that I weigh 53 kg and I'm a petite woman. And I didn't think I was heavy, but 55 kg on your head, it's heavy to carry. And so looking at the women, you can see how I have seen and experienced, them walking from one end of the supply chain of Kantamanto to the other for the clothing to be fixed. I see how hard it is for them to carry it. But it's not that because they want to carry, it's because there are no jobs, and because the way that the market is built, they rely on the labor of these women to be able to recirculate all of those 25 million pieces that I mentioned each month. As sad as it may be, the nature of the business and nature of the supply chain really heavily relies on women like this using their bodies transactionally to be able to make ends meet. And so looking at how visibly these women are struggling, we could not stand and do nothing about it. And so we decided to try to understand how this is impacting them on a physiological standpoint. Obviously, she's going through, that's 121 pounds. Okay. Physically, she's going through a lot, but from our work and our line of work, we always feel the need to show evidence and show like paperwork and show track things and be able to show evidence to the things that we're speaking to. And so we decided to do a chiropractic research study. And we took 100 women who were carrying in Kantamanto, and in collaboration with a very special woman, friend of ours, we were able to find out the impact of the head carrying past a healthy threshold. And I say that because a healthy threshold is carrying 5 kg or 2 kg on your head. And this is a cultural thing that we do as women in certain parts of Ghana, where we're putting things on our head when we go into the market and shop for groceries or shop for produce and come back home to take care of our families. That is different from what we are talking about. We are talking about dangerous head carrying here. We're talking about carrying a whole human being on your head. We're talking about the physiological impact and how it impacts the quality of life that every young woman who participates in this form of labor will have, in the sense of they will suffer certain irreparable damages to their spine that will impact the way that they walk, that will impact their ability to sleep, that will impact the ability to swallow food, that will impact the ability to even perform or do work or be able to have a quality of life. And so from the research, we have gathered that after 2 months of head carrying, these women are suffering irreparable damage. And I mean irreparable in a sense that you cannot go back to how the spine was when you started head carrying. As immediately that 2-month mark is made and you've been carrying that long, your spine starts to decompress and it starts to degenerate. And it impacts you in such a way that the cushion that's in between your spine that's supposed to help you with flexibility and movement becomes compromised. And you can imagine how hurtful that could be. Next slide, please. So on the environmental side, this is the away, and this is the background of where a lot of the women who head carry live. And as you can see, there's cattle grazing on a dump site. If you can look and zoom in properly, you will see textile waste coming out in certain places. And so this is like a compact dump site of textile waste over time. And this is what the women have to deal with. And obviously, this waste is not created by the women. It's created by a broken system of how clothing can be shipped. As waste clothing can be shipped from one part of the world to another, and it will impact communities like this, because Ghana does not have the capacity or the infrastructure to be able to absorb all of that 15 million that are coming in every week. It doesn't have the capacity to recycle at the volumes that are coming in each week. And so this is what ends up happening. Next slide. So again, this is the backdrop, and this is an aerial view of the dump site. And as you can see, there is a settlement. This is where a lot of the women and the people who do work in Kantamanto live. So imagine working hard, trying to recirculate those 25 million garments every month, and then this is the life that you have to live. That the results of the 40% that was not recirculated or reused or resold ends up being waste at your background, ends up being a weapon that people use against you, that you are not keeping your environment clean. But if the global north wasn't able to absorb all of those volumes, it baffles me how a community who is still struggling to be able to get education, access, water, basic living things, basic amenities provided, how are they able to absorb all of that? Next slide, please. Another environmental perspective, this is the waste, and this causes public health crisis. So in the previous slide, you will see that the clothing was being burnt because that is how the community is able to keep the levels down. There is nowhere for it to go. That is the away. That is the last stop for all the waste that is coming in. There is no way for us to absorb it. And so they have to burn it. And when you burn clothing, because of the impact, the chemicals that were used for it, the fabric content, the composition of the clothing, that could also create certain dangerous fumes that hurts your health. And so we have a public crisis on our hands, and this is how our beaches are looking like every week. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a community cleanup, and by this Sunday, when we went back, the textile waste is everywhere again because there is no way for the clothing to go. And it's the same clothing that's coming in each week. Next slide, please. So I've spoken to you about the issues and in terms of like social and environmental impact. I also want to talk to you about the All Foundation, who we are, and like I said, we work closely with Kantamanto Market. So we are on a mission to catalyze a justice-led circular economy in Kantamanto. And like I said before, we believe the skill set and the mindset and the languages exist in Kantamanto, and it should be prioritized and it should be replicated elsewhere in the world. And so we've piloted certain solutions and programs to not only help the community, but to also create awareness and to try and create a pathway for that justice-led circular economy to be realized on the ground. Next slide, please. And so we work in 3 tiers. The 3 tiers is material R&D, which is research and development. And then we have the direct relief and support. And then we have advocacy. And in material R&D, we buy back waste from Kantamanto, clothing that would have ended up on the beach or would have been burnt in the open or would have been dumped. We try to buy as much as we can at a good price so that the retailers are able to make back some of the money that they lost from buying the bale. And then when we buy it, we take it to our warehouse, and we prepare it, we retreat it, and then we shred it into small particles that are like that. And then we sort them, obviously we sort them according to color and try to create some beauty out of it. And then we bake them at a high temperature using a natural bind that you find in Ghana. It's from cassava dough. And cassava is like yams, which I'm sure a lot of you know. The starch that we get from that, we cook it so it becomes a binding agent, and then we bake it at high temperature. And this is the result of it. And it's been pieced together to make a tabletop for a table. Next, please. So the second tier which we work at is the direct relief and support. And that's where the KIA come in, and that's why the chiropractic research came in. And that's why taking the women out of head carrying came in. So the 100 girls that we did the research with, we were able to take all of them, pull all of them out of dangerous head carry. And yes, someone will ask, if you're just taking 100 girls, what about the others who are head carrying? The long-term goal is for us to eradicate dangerous head carrying, and that can come out from being able to upfit the market so that the aisleways can be accessed by trucks, can be accessed by vehicles, it can be accessed at least by push carts, so that women don't have to head carry to be able to recirculate the millions that are coming each week. And so pulling the 100 girls, saved 100 girls in terms of provided another pathway for them to be able to earn by, participating in our material R&D and shredding material, as you were seeing, shredding t-shirts to be able to make into furniture and sound absorbers and fiber boards. But the long-term goal, which is to make dangerous head carrying just basically abolish it and make it impossible for folks to head carrying in the market by providing another alternative, which is using a pushcat. And so with the women that we have been able to take, right now, I think the last time I checked, we've been able to take over 150 girls in total and brought them into a program, which is my Bilgu program, meaning sisterhood in Dagbani, which is the primary main language of women who migrate from the northern part of Ghana for various reasons. And Mabilgu basically is a wraparound program trying to provide support, direct relief in case of emergency, paid healthcare throughout your apprenticeship placement, or if you've been offered scholarship, we take care of all of that. Being able to meet monthly and come together as sisters and discuss issues that are concerning our work, our lives, just creating a safe space for these women to be able to literally unpack the heavy burdens that they've been carrying all of these years, and to be able to find a safe space to unpack that and to be able to become role models for women who are coming up after them. And then the third, which I guess I mentioned briefly, is advocacy. And all of the work that we're doing feeds it and making sure that, yes, there's a crisis. Yes, there's an issue that needs to be tackled. At the same time, I want people to also focus on what is possible with the waste and what is possible in terms of tackling the problem from a social perspective. What can be done using certain kinds of programs to be able to get the girls move them from poverty and move them from exploitative labor to a transformed kind of pathway that is sustainable for them to be able to make ends meet. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, providing safe space. So here you see our self-defense instructor teaching the girls how to defend themselves. These are marginalized women, and we want to literally arm them with some techniques so that if any man or any person tries to abuse them physically or tries to force themselves on them, they have the first tools to be able to react, to respond appropriately, and report afterwards. So we're going back to the wraparound program. As much as we have the capacity for trying to provide these women with a safe space, an inclusive and engaging environment that allows them to be able to go into sustainable livelihoods. Next, please. Okay, so on advocacy, we have the ER&R, which is ecotox remediation and reparation research. Basically, the background is the aerial shot from before, where we saw that the clothing was being burnt. And as you can see, the land has been compromised because of the waste. The greens are not there anymore. There's hardly any greens because of all the waste that's blanketing the topsoil. And my colleagues, what you see on the screen, are taking samples of the water and back in the lagoon, are taking samples of the soil, and are taking samples of the air to try and understand how the clothing waste is reacting to our environment, and basically using that information, sharing that, putting that data out there for the world to know, and also using that data to hold brands accountable because of the waste that is being shipped here. Some would say, why don't we just ban secondhand clothing? But I would say there are 30,000 people in Kantamanto market who rely on the job, who rely on the ability to recirculate clothing, who have families to feed. And so to not have an alternative for the 30,000 people who are working in the market and just ban clothing as a reaction to the clothing waste that is being sent, it's a knee-jerk reaction on my part. We need to use what exists, the skill set and the mindset that exists. We need to prioritize that and level that up, while also tackling the issues that have been resulted from the clothing waste. And this is why ER&R comes in. Basically, holding brands accountable for what they have done to the environment in all places of the world, using the ER&R research to help us with our extended producer responsibility. And that is basically a producer pay kind of fee. If I make something, I have to put forward some money, a percentage of the price that I'm selling at, so that there will be funds available from when it's time for us to manage my product well, in a way that does not impact the environment or does not impact anyone socially. And so, again, this is advocacy and holding brands accountable to the damaging impact they have had on places all over the world. Next, please. Again, so the samples that they take, my colleagues come back and then they put it under my colleagues put it under a microscope, under an ultraviolet ray, to ascertain the microplastic and microfiber content and other impurities in the water. Of every 25 millimeter of filter of water, there are thousands and thousands of microfiber and microplastics that we see. Next slide, please. So this is the image of a 25 millimeter filter, and the brown thing you're seeing, the filter is supposed to be white, but the water being put into through the filter, you can see the first layer is dark, and that dark is mud basically, and in that mud you will find all of these impurities. So you have different colors that are being captured here. So the ones that are blue are plastic microfibers and plastic itself. And the ones that are red and other different colors, like orange or reddish or burnt orange, are natural fibers that you see. So in every 25 millimeter of fiber captured in these kinds of samples, you're seeing thousands and thousands of microplastic in the water. And these are samples that are also taken from the beach. These are samples that are taken from other parts of Accra, to just try and get a picture of what's happening in our waterways and in our water bodies, and how it's impacting certain communities, like the fishing communities, communities that live along the coastline. How is it impacting them on a public health level? Yes. Next slide, I guess that would be it. Okay, so from all that I've spoken to you about, I thought I will leave you with an activity that helps you connect with Kantamanto and what they do there. So I guess when you go home today, or sometime in the week when Catriona and Andrea set this up, you will look in your closet or your wardrobe and look at the kinds of garments that you have. You look at the brands that you wear, and then select one item to repair. It may not necessarily be repair only. It can be you sewing a nice, intricate design on another part, on a part of the garment, just for you to connect with the clothing, and for you to almost visualize what goes into the work that people like Kantamanto do. They get a bale, they open the bale, they sort it out and pick out pieces that they know their clients would like, and also sort out things that they know will need extra love to be able to be sold. And so they will pick that up and then try to create something nice, intricate, maybe screen print on it, maybe put a flower there, maybe put a trim there, just to elevate the piece so that it can find a home. So I'm hoping that you are able to do this, and I hear from you on how it went. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Chloe, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all the hard work that you do to help not only the environment, but the women that you work with as well. I found so many of the stories in your presentation just went straight to my heart. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. I think it's really important that we know what happens to waste, and we know that there is no a way, and that there are people affected by the choices that we're making with our waste, and we need to think about this, and as well as the impact we're having on the environment. If you want to know more about the work of the OR Foundation, there are some resources in the classroom resource folder about some of their campaigns, about some of their work, where you can find out how you can support them through your work with EcoSchools or through your Rights Respecting Schools, if you would like to have a look at that. Like Chloe said, we're asking you to have a look at your own clothes. There are some resources in the folder, again, where you can find out how to do some basic stitch work so you can make these repairs or embellishments. Like Chloe was saying, you could maybe stitch flowers on a jumper that maybe has a hole in it. Or you can have a look and see what kinds of clothing you have in your wardrobe and the amounts of time that you're spending wearing these as well. Some of the things we're going to ask you to look at are, is there anything in your wardrobe that you've worn more than 20 times? Is there anything that was a gift, a hand-me-down? Is there something you can repair? And we're also included the survey the OR Foundation have done about some of the most prolific brands that are found in the waste clothing that is shipped to Ghana as well. So you can have a look at that in the resource folder. I just wanted to share with you, this is my favorite jumper that I have worn way more than 30 times. It's at least 17 years old, so it's still holding up quite well. It's a staple in my wardrobe, so maybe there's something like that in your wardrobe as well. And we'd love to hear from you if you try this out, especially if you could show us some of your stitching. That would be very cool. And we'd also like you to, if you would like to create a video inspired by our winning Young Reporters entry, Fast Fashion Dining, using your voices to ask for change in the fashion industry. And now that you know some of the environmental and social impacts of the fashion industry and waste clothing, perhaps this is something you would like to create to share your opinion on what should be done to start solving this problem. If you have any questions for Chloe about her work, about the work of her foundation, you can please feel free to email us at ecoschools@keepscotlandbeautiful.org, and we'll pass those questions on, and we will share the answers to them at our assembly on Friday, which I hope you're also able to join us for. And we're looking forward to seeing all of your amazing work during the week and to showcase it on Friday's assembly together with the answers to the questions. We already have some wonderful photographs coming in from previous lessons. We have some lovely magpie drawings from our early years lesson, and please keep them coming. We love to see your work, even if you just say hello and tell us what you think of the lesson. You can find us on social media platforms at KSB Scotland. I don't know if you noticed, the OR Foundation is also on social media, and their handle is at the OR is present. So if you want to have a look about their work, they're also on social media there too. And as always, I'd like to thank you, Chloe, for your time today and for sharing your knowledge. Thank you to our audience for taking time out of your busy class day to join us for today's lesson, and for teachers, as always, for your support. I hope to see you again tomorrow for the last lesson in our Sustainable Living Week, and also on Friday for our assembly. But as always, that is all we have for today. So bye for now.